Last time we gathered, we talked about first who, then what, the centrality of making sure you have the right people in your team. Remember, the Good to Great book, which we're working through at the moment, is linear. First leadership, then you make sure you have the right people in your team. Now, a critical dynamic that we often have in our teams, I want to explore today, and you'll see some diagrams that come up, and I do encourage you to do more reading on it. I'm just going to give you a very, very quick summary, but I find this dynamic plays out so often in our teams and so often in our parishes and congregations. And so it's called Karpman's triangle. And the idea is there's a triangle where we all take different positions. Somebody takes the position of the victim, somebody takes the position of the perpetrator, and somebody takes the position of a rescuer. And what that means is that often in groups that we're part of, people are playing these three roles. Now, the victim is somebody who, for whatever reason, has chosen to have the identity that I am a victim and therefore I can't do anything to help my situation, and so I need other people to fix my world or to help me out. And then what happens is a whole lot of people become rescuers, and they see, oh, Justin's feeling really down, and they all rescue me. And often we therefore point somebody as the perpetrator. You know, well, Justin's feeling really down. Must have been that Bishop Ali was mean to him. And so Bishop Ali gets put as the perpetrator. And so we find ourselves in church constantly in these triangles where people become victims, perpetrators, and rescuers. And the amount of times I've watched groups or churches where for whatever reason, somebody has chosen to live in the identity as a victim, and then suddenly the whole church chooses to rescue and make one person, the vicar or the vestry or whoever, the perpetrators. This dynamic plays out all the time. Now, let's be really clear, though, what we mean by the victim. So, I'm walking down the road and I get mugged, and that's bad, and I get beaten up, and there's no doubt that I have been injured, and that is very, very bad. But at that point, if I choose to then go home and never walk out the door again because it's unsafe and I can never engage with the world, at that point, I'm choosing to move into an identity of a victim. Because actually what I most need to do is, if I've just been mugged and beaten up, is I need to get my courage back to take control back on my life and actually to be able to walk the street again and know that actually I'm probably not going to get mugged again. And so actually what I most need to do is actually to be able to take control back of my life and not live in fear. The problem is when we live in identity of a victim, actually we do the exact opposite. We actually never manage to take control of our life back, and instead we live in this dependency relationship. But because we're churches, we're just full of all of us who love people dearly, and so as soon as we see somebody who is looking down or perceived to have been hurt, then we just rally round them. But actually often our rallying round and our rescuing is unhelpful, because actually the reality is probably they might just need to take some steps for themselves to regain their sovereignty, to regain their power. And so this idea of rescuing, although it feels very Christian and very real loving, often we're actually diminishing the person in the process. And often in these situations too, especially in churches, it's very, very easy for church leaders to be cast in the role of perpetrator. So, you know, as a church leader, of course this never happens to me, I have seen happen to other church leaders, but as a church leader you might every now and then have a conversation where you are sort of saying something loving but maybe a little bit hard to hear, but then the person who receives the conversation suddenly goes, oh, the church leader's been very mean to me, they've been mean to me, and they go and tell everybody else, and then everybody else rallies around and goes, oh, there, you've been hurt, you're a victim, the mean church leader has bullied you. No, the church leader just actually probably said some loving words, which although were hard to hear, are actually loving words. But we constantly are falling into these triangles, and can I say that actually the bit to be really aware of is the rescuing bit, because the rescuing bit enables the victim to continue, and can also often continues to create perpetrators. So how do we get out of these triangles? Well, we flip the triangle into what's called the empowerment triangle, and you can find it written up on the internet, the empowerment triangle, where the victim actually becomes the creator. And the way you do that is as opposed to, you say to the victim, what do you want and what are you going to do about it? So if you want a safe life, what are you going to do about it? I can't make your life safe. What are you going to do to make your life safe? So you've caused the victim to move to being the creator, where they actually create their life. Critical thing to move somebody from a rescuer is you say to the rescuer, how do you really see the victim? Because if they really understand what they're saying, oh, the victim is so useless and so pathetic that they can't do anything for themselves, so I have to do everything for them. That is really horrendous. So when you actually understand what your perception of the person is as a rescuer, you can actually change that. Because actually what I see is this person here is a creature of God, much beloved of God, and empowered by God to create the future that they should have. And that's a very different way of seeing somebody than when you're seeing them through the eyes of a rescuer. So a rescuer instead becomes a coach, and coaching this person, not doing it for them, but coaching the person so they can actually find the future that they have. The final role, the perpetrator, actually just becomes the challenger. Actually, do I love you? Do I want the best for you? Am I trying to help you get the best? So therefore, these words I'm saying, what I'm trying to say here is actually to help you, not to harm you. So if my motivation is good and I'm for you, then actually I'm not a perpetrator, I'm actually a challenger. So again, we're trying to flip that triangle up the other way, and so victims become creators, rescuers become coaches, and perpetrators become challengers. But can I encourage us that this dynamic of Karpman's triangle plays out through our structures all the time in church, and if you're not aware of it, if you haven't trained into it, you will fall foul of it a lot.